What's up, guys? Blaine Duncan here from Halloween Lives, the podcast of Michael Myers, joined by my brother, Austin. Dude, happy 2024. It's episode number 51 and our first episode of the new year. Happy New Year, man.
Happy New Year, brother. How you doing?
I'm excited to be here. We have a really fun show that is lined up. The holidays are over. All the craziness and the chaos that goes along with it is said and done. And man, we're like 300 and I don't even know how many days away from Halloween we are. Like 310. I don't know. I got to look it up real quick because I feel like you know we really like we should almost have like a running countdown. We should know how far away from Halloween we actually are. But how many days until Halloween, Google? Let's see here. It is 302 days. I wasn't that far off.
Damn.
302 days to Halloween as of the recording of this episode. So we're always looking forward to that. But yeah, man, we have a really fun episode tonight. I'm really excited. This is one that we've been talking about doing for a while. And I don't know if you want to call it the Halloween butterfly effect or the what ifs of the Halloween franchise. But basically what we're going to be doing here tonight is we're going to be talking about what if something had happened, or what if something hadn't happened, or the butterfly effect, meaning if we hadn't have gotten this one particular thing, maybe we would have gotten this. And if you haven't seen the butterfly effect with Ashton Kutcher, it's kind of what we're talking about here, right? Like one little misstep or one little different thing that you could have done differently could have greatly affected this franchise as we know it, for better or for worse, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that could be better, a lot of things that could be worse, but it is, we know the franchise as we do right now, and it would be kind of interesting to know what would have happened if some of these things didn't happen or were maybe changed. So that's what we're going to be talking about here tonight. Really excited to get into it. Do you want to get us kicked off and rolling with your first one?
Yeah, so you did 3 as well, correct?
I did 3. I have a 4th just in case and I might even read my 4th if we don't double up just to have it. But yeah, I did 3.
Okay. First of all, I want to preface this and say I had so much fun thinking of these. I really hope you guys watching at home enjoy this episode as much as I think we did putting this together. And I'm really excited to talk. I think mine kind of build as far as like how cool it would be. So I still love my first one though. My first what if butterfly effect is what if Jamie Lee Curtis restored her role as Laurie Strode in Halloween 4, 5, and 6?
Ooh, dude.
So I would keep Jamie Lloyd as her child because I do think the kid piece works really well. And it would help give Laurie some development as a character. But perhaps Laurie would not play as big of a role in part 4, but as 5 and 6 begin unlocking the mystery of the Cult of Thorn, we have an established character to be our point of view as we see what controls the shape. The butterfly effect of this would probably be that H2O, Resurrection, and the David Gordon Green trilogy wouldn't work anymore because the tropes and development that Laurie goes through in those films would happen in this alternate universe, and those movies would then be repetitive. I think overall this change would create a cohesive, like ultimate 5-film narrative with Halloween 3 being the only outlier. But it would be like clearly these are the classic 5 Halloween movies. No weird timeline stuff to pop in between with Laurie's character. These are just the movies, man. That was the first one I had today.
Dude, I love that. And not one I even ever thought of, to be honest with you. But here's the thing. Like, okay, let's think about this. Like, let's take a deep dive into 4, 5, and 6 here for a second. Meaning we've changed them as far as the movies themselves, because Laurie Strode is now a main or at least a pertinent character in these films with this idea, right? Like 4, you and I think the majority of fans absolutely love 4, right? Totally. 5, I think you and I agree that it tends to fall towards the back half of the franchise of the films that we really truly love. And I think a lot of fans would agree with us on that. 6, you and I kind of have a little bit of mixed emotions on it, a little bit, maybe some differing feelings of how much we actually like it. And that really seems to be sort of the general consensus of most fans. You have people who fall into the categories of they really like it, and then you have other fans who are like, nope, it sucks. They went way too deep into this Cult of Thorn thing. I don't want to know why Michael was the way that he was. But so look at those 3 films. If Laurie Strode had been introduced into all 3 of those, we wouldn't have those 3 films, right? We wouldn't have Halloween 4, which would really suck because Halloween 4 was awesome. But what if taking this sort of a little bit further, what if replace, and you'd have to change the structure of the story a little bit, but what if you replaced basically Rachel's character with Jamie's, Jamie Lee Curtis or Laurie Strode? What if Laurie Strode essentially took Rachel's place? That, if and like I said, you wouldn't obviously have her. She's not like a stepchild, a child anymore of this family, or a foster child, or things like that. But if they kept the same sort of idea behind it, and maybe take Rachel and replace her with Jamie, that could be kind of cool. Like that'd be all right.
My thought is, if you're going to go down this path of Michael is part of this Cult of Thorn that's based off of a family lineage, Jamie was a pretty new character to bring in, and it gets difficult because there's Jamie Lee Curtis, but Jamie Lloyd was a difficult character, especially in 5 and 6, to really introduce this idea of the Cult of Thorn. I think it would have been way more, I don't know. I think I could have gotten into it a little bit more if Laurie played a role in figuring that out, along with the help of like Dr. Loomis, because you set this up in Halloween 2 with the Samhain on the board, that it's kind of a natural conclusion. You want to see all the characters come together in one spot. Obviously it works. However, if you like Halloween 5 and 6, it works fine that way. But I, as much as I love Jamie being our main character in those films, 4 and 5, but I think Laurie is, this already established character. I've talked in our hot takes how I wish there was more characterization of Laurie in Halloween 1 and 2. This would give the opportunity for Laurie to be a more fleshed out character, and for that Cult of Thorn really to hit even harder, because now you've got Laurie who's directly impacted by this. Not only is she being chased by Michael Myers, she's now aware that there's a bigger play at hand. I don't know. I think it would be cool.
Very interesting. I wonder, I know in reading the Taking Shape books that there was the original idea for Halloween 4 was that it was going to take place in Chicago, that Michael Myers was going to be actually dressed differently. He was going to be wearing like a leather jacket, and it was going to be very like 80s rock star, like Michael drives like a freaking Porsche or a Corvette that he steals from some rock stars. It was just like this whole crazy idea, right? So originally the idea was to have Laurie Strode in Halloween 4, but my understanding is the reason why none of that ever happened was she really sort of wanted to distance herself from the horror world, because at this point she'd been, Halloween, The Fog, Halloween 2. She was in Prom Night. I think that came out. That obviously would have come up before 1988. She was in some of these other horror movies that she was really trying to distance herself from being like just only a scream queen. Which is really too bad, because she really was good in those films, and not to take away from Christmas with the Cranks, but she would have. I have so many problems with that movie. But she, she really could have done a lot more for this franchise if she had stuck with it, and who knows, maybe she would have gotten killed off in a different way. Maybe she would have gotten killed off in 6 or 5, or I guess not 5, but in 6, right? She would have been killed off. Who knows? But, crazy, dude. That never even crossed my mind, but therein lies the butterfly effect, right? What if Jamie had been in 4, 5, and 6? Jamie Lee Curtis. I keep saying Jamie, not to be confused with Jamie Lloyd.
I don't know why they had to do that. I mean, I think that's why they named her Jamie, But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I just think at the end of the day, fans would look back at those 5 movies and be like, okay, that's the definitive story of Michael Myers, and then everything else is kind of extra or whatever.
Right.
But even for us, you can't really look at Halloween 4 without being like, okay, this is a split off in the timeline.
The other thing that I just thought of too is I'm okay, like with the way that it all transpired. I'm okay that we lost the Laurie Strode character in 4, 5, and 6.
Totally.
And the reason for that is because you need to interject fresh blood, right? You need to interject something new, some new idea into the story to keep it alive. And I think we see that a little bit like with the Scream series, right? Like
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, exactly. Sidney Prescott. Like you need to get away from her being in the movie, and like it's just the same story over and over. The girl, the good girl gets chased by the bad guy, and the good girl always defeats the bad guy. Like you have to get away from that idea of it being the same characters all the time. But then we see some of these main characters like a Sidney Prescott being brought back into the movies in some ways. And I don't know, man. I'm glad that we had an absence of Jamie Lee Curtis for for the late 80s and 90s, early 90s, I guess, films, because I appreciate that new blood being injected into the story.
Yeah, it worked out in the end.
It did.
So what's your first what if, man?
Okay, well, my first what if is something that is somewhat well known. That I'm gonna just read what I have here, what I wrote. What if Donald Pleasance had never been offered the role of Dr. Sam Loomis, and famed horror actors Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee had taken on the role, as they were reportedly John Carpenter's first 2 picks? Right. So we've heard this story before that Donald Pleasance was not the first choice of John Carpenter. He ended up getting the role, I believe, because his daughter, Donald Pleasance's daughter, was a fan of Assault on Precinct 13, which John Carpenter had done prior to Halloween. So that was the whole reason he was even interested in reading the script to begin with. But when you think about this, take Donald Pleasance out of the picture and insert Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee, 2 fairly well-known actors, how that could have changed really the shape of this franchise, because Donald Pleasance, his character of Dr. Loomis, became so iconic, right? So iconic in a way that they even brought him back in the latest trilogy in Halloween Kills, and like they needed to make him a part of the story again, because they knew that fans would just like hold on to that thing, right? But would we have gotten the same response from the fans if it had been Peter Cushing or if it had been Christopher Lee? So I did want to mention real quick as well, before we really start digging into this a little bit, is, I had to look up. So Donald Pleasance died at age 75 in 1995. Okay. So he was 75 years old in 1995. Filming for Halloween 6 had basically just wrapped. They were doing some reshoots or whatever, but he died essentially at the very, very last tail end of the production of Halloween 6. Peter Cushing, he was 81 years old when he died in 1994. Okay, so think about the fact that Donald Pleasance was in Halloween 6. Peter Cushing, if he was Donald Pleasance, or I'm sorry, if he was Dr. Loomis's character that played that character of Dr. Loomis, he would have never even been around to make Halloween 6. So assuming he would have been in part 4 and part 5, and like we would have gotten that same thing, right? We wouldn't have gotten him in part 6. Christopher Lee, however, died in 2015 at the age of 93. So we would have had him for part 6, for H2O, for whatever may have happened after that. If they would have continued on with that storyline in some way, maybe that would have pushed back either the reboot or maybe of Rob Zombie's, 1 and 2, or maybe that reboot would have never happened, because they would have been able to carry on the character of Dr. Loomis through Christopher Lee. So I guess my point with this all is statistically, okay, looking at the statistics and death dates and things like that, all three of these gentlemen, unfortunately, are no longer with us. But when they died, could have potentially played a factor in what happened with this franchise over the years, with Peter Cushing dying in 94, Donald Pleasance in 95, and then obviously Christopher Lee, like I just mentioned, not until 2015. So it's kind of interesting to think about, like, what would have happened? What would have been if Donald Pleasance wasn't Dr. Loomis?
Man, I got to freak out for a second because I did not know that was ever the plan of John Carpenter to either have Christopher Lee or Peter Cushing for my Star Wars people. Huge names in Star Wars.
Yep.
You've got Tarkin and Count Dooku.
What a nerd.
Hey, we're all nerds in this franchise, and I think we got some friends who are who are all about it too. But I was thinking about what each one would kind of bring to the character as you were talking. I think Cushing would have brought that, like, I think maybe would have been the better actor for this. I think I agree. He's like stoic, and he's a little bit frightening, and he's
scary looking,
dude. Yes, yeah,
he's scary looking.
I think he would have been awesome on screen.
Yeah, I was as I was writing this, like, I was looking up pictures of Peter Cushing, and I mean, no knock on Peter Cushing, God rest his soul, right? But he was a very, like, his face was very, like, sunken in, and, like, he was kind of like a string bean sort of character, or just had that look to him, and he, in some very weird way, reminds me of a little less freaky version of the old man that we get in Poltergeist 2, who, like, stands out in the rain and shit like that. Like, he had a very creepy look to him. And yeah, that's what I was thinking about too, is, looking at Christopher Lee, cool, big name. Obviously he was in a bunch of movies. Peter Cushing, also a big name, but creepy, very creepy.
I think as far as overall being the actor and having that role, obviously very physically different than Donald Pleasance, probably less like empathetic we would feel with him. He's right. Less, but as far as being like this, like, sterile clinical doctor, definitely, especially doctor that kind of goes crazy, definitely awesome for a horror movie. I'll say this about Christopher Lee though. His voice would have been incredible as Dr. Loomis. He's got the deepest voice I've ever heard. And obviously he played Dracula. He's a huge name in horror himself. John Carpenter, again, genius. What two great actors to be thought of for that role. But if Christopher Lee had taken that role, I mean, yeah, man, we would have had him all the way through. I mean, H2O would have looked entirely different. Right. Resurrection would have looked entirely different, because I think even if Jamie Lee Curtis says, you know what, I'm good with this, kill me off, do what you got to do. If you had Dr. Loomis, you've still got one of the OG characters in the movies.
Right.
I think Halloween Resurrection would have been a different film.
I'm just looking up here because I wanted to see what Christopher Lee's so going with that, right? If Christopher Lee was the guy and like we talked about, he would have been around longer. We may have gotten more of a Dr. Loomis storyline. So his last film came out actually after he died. But his last film came out in 2016. He died in 2015. So that just goes to show he was still essentially acting up until the point of his death at 93 years old. Not saying he would have, been doing the Dr. Loomis character at that point, or maybe they would have found a way to kill him off. Who knows? And I think that was, I don't quote me on this, but I feel like I heard or I read somewhere that Donald Pleasance had said he wanted Halloween 6 to be his final Halloween film, that he wanted that to be done so he could, move on with his life essentially. So it was weird that it sort of worked out the way that it did, that he passed away shortly, thereafter. But Christopher Lee was quoted as saying one of his biggest regrets in his acting career was that he turned down the role of Dr. Sam Loomis. So what could have been? What if Christopher Lee or what if Peter Cushing had taken on that role? Who knows? We'll never know. But we got Donald Pleasance, and we're damn happy with that as well.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we just touched on at the end is how Halloween Resurrection would have changed from that casting choice. My second what if is simply, what if Halloween Resurrection was good? And this might not seem like that crazy of an idea at first, but the implications down the line shake everything we know up. Rick Rosenthal, director of Halloween 2, has had over 20 years to digest the character of Michael Myers and creates another true to shape Halloween sequel following the events of Halloween H2O. Rather than focusing on the younger crowd like the most recent entry had, he wishes to take the story back to the cat and mouse game he crafted back in 1981. With a serious, dark tone, a lack of kung fu, and a perfect setting of the decrepit Myers house, the 8th film of the franchise not only resurrects Michael Myers, but the series as a whole. Michael Myers lives on, leaving room for several more entries down the line following the Akkad's original idea that we cannot see Michael definitively die. This eliminates the need for Rob Zombie's remakes and likely even the newest trilogy by David Gordon Green.
Yeah,
what do you think?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, well, first off, I love the idea if Halloween Resurrection would have been a really good movie, because really what we're talking about with Halloween Resurrection is we are talking about a film that basically was the death knell of the franchise at that time. Like this thing was a 747 nose diving directly into the ground, which is crazy given the fact that H2O had massive worldwide success. But Halloween Resurrection just about killed the franchise, and it almost became much like the Hellraiser franchise, where we were headed straight for like direct to home video release. It was not a good time for the franchise. So I think the idea alone that if Halloween Resurrection had been a box office success, if they had gotten rid of some of the bullshit that they put in there, maybe had a better script, but still stuck with this idea overall, because I still really like the investigation idea, right? The totally. Myers house, whatever. I think it's a great idea. The execution of that idea and some of the salt and pepper that they sprinkled into this movie, whether needed or not, was not a good idea. And yeah, dude, I don't know, man. I think if you were to really, if that would have been a home run movie, I think you're absolutely right. We would have never gotten the Rob Zombie films. Never. It wouldn't have happened. They needed to reboot the series because fans had essentially given up on the franchise. They were like, this is ridiculous. The motherfucker just had his head cut off. Now he's back because he choked out a paramedic. You got the shitty storyline and the shitty acting and the shitty whatever. Like, fans gave up on the franchise. Myself, even being one of them, that was like, man, this thing sucks. But we rebooted with Rob Zombies, and then obviously got the David Gordon Green trilogy after that. That would definitely have changed the game. You, like you said, you would have gotten more movies probably under that same storyline, and it would have continued on, because I really think, and I'm talking a lot here, but I really think like the Rob Zombie, I feel like when I look at the franchise, I look at it's like BC and AD, right? Yep. The BC is 1 through 8. Yep. The reboot that reset everything, and now it's AD after the reboot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely the case. And what I'll say is this: if Halloween Resurrection didn't kill the franchise, at that point you would be 9 sequels deep into this franchise, and another Halloween Resurrection level film would have come out and ruin everything. But it is fun to think of the idea of like, okay, let's say 8 was a commercial success, and you bring in 9, and then on the 10th one they're like, okay, let's do our Halloween ends, and we're going to conclude everything in this big massive way and really put 2 bookshelves or 2 bookends on this thing. It could have been really cool, a 10 film like series or a 9 or whatever. But ultimately that's not what we got. I think kind of similar to your point with the Jamie Lee Curtis coming back from 4, 5, 6. I'm happy now with everything said and done that Resurrection sucked, because it brought some of my favorite Halloween movies because of that. But it is kind of the butterfly effect. You move a chair in the past and pretty soon everything's completely different. If 8 hadn't have sucked, the Rob Zombie movies never would have came out. Rob Zombie could have taken the helm of a sequel, would have felt very different. But ultimately, like, the fact that we got, for me, it's the David Gordon Green trilogy. If the fact that we got that made all of that worth it to me.
Right. I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we may have gotten a really underwhelming film in part 8, but yeah, we got the reboots, we got the David Gordon Green trilogy, and who knows what's next. I mean, that's the exciting part. So,
and all I gotta say to that,
trick or treat, motherfucker.
It's been a while since we played that. We need to get that back in the show more.
I know. Every time I say totally, I think about it.
Totally. All right. There you go. All right. So let's keep moving on. Great what if that you just brought forward. I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that a little bit. Okay. I'm going to ask the question, what if Halloween H2O had never happened? What if we never got that? What if we never got H2O as we know it? Jamie Lee Curtis never returned. Josh Hartnett kept making, movies like The Faculty and Pearl Harbor, but he was never a star in Halloween H2O. What would have happened? Because similarly, or however you want to look at it, to what we were just talking about, if we had never gotten H2O, we wouldn't have gotten Halloween Resurrection, and there would have been no need for a reboot, right? Because we probably wouldn't have, at least not at that time, right? And I'm talking, if you take away Halloween H2O, that means in 1995, that's when Halloween 6 came out. We wouldn't have had a Halloween film from 1995 until, let's just say, the reboot did happen in 2007. So 12 years, right? If all of that, roll all of that together and just ask yourself, well, what would the franchise have done? Would they have continued on? Would they have said, okay, we don't have Jamie Lee Curtis, we don't have this storyline of Michael going to a different state, they don't, he's not tracking her down? What would they have done? Would they had obviously put to bed the Cult of Thorns storyline, I think, as much as they possibly could, right? I mean, it was exposed for what it was, that Michael was, was this curse and yada, yada, yada. But what would they have done? The other thing to think about with all of this is, if H2O hadn't have happened, what about all the money that would have been lost for this franchise? So I did a little bit of digging, and Halloween H2O grossed $75 million worldwide with a budget of only $17 million. So they made a shit ton of money off of H2O. And it, at that time, up until the 2018 film came out, was the highest grossing film of the entire franchise. So H2O, as we've talked about, and unfortunately, you were, well, were you? Yeah, you were around. Yeah, you would have been around when you would have been 1. Right? When H2O came out. But you weren't there when it happened. But I remember H2O was a huge deal when that movie came out. Like, it was a huge freaking deal. I still remember the commercials on TV. Like, I remember Entertainment Tonight talking about it. Like, there was a lot to do. I remember, I have this memory, and I forget why or where, but you and I are from Minnesota. Minnesota is known for the Mall of America, which is my own personal hell. Like if I died today and I had to go to hell, Satan would say, "You're going to the Mall of America for eternity." And I would scream. I would tremble and shake because I hate that place so much. Side note, right? Okay,
completely agree.
Don't like the Mall of America. Probably talk to anybody from Minnesota and they'll tell you the exact same thing.
Totally.
But anyway, I remember going to the Mall of America shortly after H2O came out. I don't remember when. It could have been a year, could have been 2 years, could have been 5 years. I don't remember. But I remember they had a Planet Hollywood at the Mall of America. And at Planet Hollywood, they had a knife, screen-used knife that was used in Halloween H2O. And I remember even at that time being like super fascinated by it. And like somewhere there's a photo of that thing. And that's what we got to figure out. I don't know where the hell it is, but I do remember taking a photo of that knife. And it was in like a, display box hanging up on the wall. I guess my point is that that movie was so big that it made like a prop, made it into Hollywood. What the hell did I just say? Planet
Hollywood, which I had to just Google because I'd never heard of that.
Oh, dude, you are so young.
Never in my life heard of a Planet Hollywood. Continue.
Don't they still have a Planet Hollywood out in Vegas?
Yeah, they do.
Okay. All right. That's the only one that I know of. The one on Mall of America is closed. But anyway, they also had, I remember this specifically, on the ceiling, they had like this full-sized Sylvester Stallone thing. And I don't even know what movie it's from. Somebody probably knows in the comments. But he was completely naked. And they had a balloon, just a balloon, like a not filled up balloon. So basically like a condom just over his dick. And it was like hanging on the ceiling. Yeah, dude. I remember being like, 14 years old and being like, what the fuck is that? But anyway, so those are my Hollywood.
Weird.
Yeah, those are my Hollywood or Planet Hollywood memories. Anyway, my point is that H2O was a huge, huge film. So it made $75 million, grossed $75 million on a $17 million budget. Halloween Resurrection, not quite so successful. That only grossed $38 million worldwide. So basically half of that. It was just essentially a flop. And then, the other, as I mentioned, the big thing is that we probably wouldn't have had the Rob Zombie films, or at least the way that we got them. Not saying that there wouldn't have been a reboot, but it may not have come to, to be the way that we've seen it now. For those who are big fans of the Rob Zombie films, that would suck, right? So what would that be like if H2O had never happened? We would have greatly changed the look of the franchise.
I think this really makes me think about the creative decisions that went into Halloween 6 and realizing how much of a limb they went out on with that film. Like, that is such a risky spot. If we were to look back and let's say no other films happened after that, people would be like, yeah, the Halloween franchise ended in this really odd, strange way. I think I was born after Halloween 6. Look back at Halloween 6 and I've never had the thought of like, oh, this is it, because I've always known at Halloween H2O. But if you take out that possibility, ultimately the way, as soon as you started talking about it, I was like, we wouldn't have Halloween, and B, if there were more sequels past that, they would have been those direct to DVD or direct to VHS, whatever. Right. It definitely, it needed that breath of fresh air. Clearly they saw they had gone off course, and the way to bring it back was to get Jamie Lee Curtis back on screen with Michael Myers. Right. But yeah, no, what a strange thought to think, that would have been the end of what we know. Yeah.
It would have been really weird. And obviously, there are so many people out there, yourself included, who are huge H2O fans. Totally. Who knows what we would have gotten, right? What would have happened? But it is kind of interesting to think about. And obviously, a lot of money lost, right? The Accods, the studios, things like that. I mean, a lot of money lost because you're talking H2O, Resurrection, Rob Zombie's films, the David Gordon Green trilogy. Like, so many things could have changed. So far fewer films could have ever been made. Who knows? 6 could have been the last one, right? I mean, I don't think that would have been the case necessarily. Even though, as I mentioned with Marie when we talked about that long lost Halloween film that was never made, that a Fangoria writer had actually written in Fangoria that the only thing scarier than Michael Myers was the idea of getting another Halloween film. He said that after in his review of Halloween 6. So who knows, man? The franchise could have been completely dead. You know, Jamie Lee Curtis, for as much as we like shit on her at times, she put the paddles on the heart of this franchise and hit the buttons and shocked it back to life with H2O. So
she put the paddles on the heart?
Yeah, like an AED, a defibrillator.
Oh, the paddles on the heart, dude. I'm thinking boats. Get out of here.
You thinking boats?
Yeah, like a paddle on a boat, dude. I guarantee. Comment below. Let me know what you thought of when you hear the word paddle. Fire.
Well, that's what they were called back in the day if you weren't born so shortly ago.
Wow, what was I going to say? I was going to say something kind of relevant.
Probably not.
No, probably not. Here's what I would have said. The franchise definitely would have been sold earlier than obviously now, like it has been now. Somebody would have picked it up a few years down the road, like 2017, 18, us would have been like, let's put together every dollar our whole family has and buy this franchise. Right. But obviously that didn't happen, and that's a good thing. Yeah. So let me get into my final what if. Good what if. I'm scared of that what if reality. This one, I think, is one that you and I are going to agree on because we've talked about it before. I think more so privately, and I've written something that I think might show up on this channel at some point that has a little bit of this in it. But what if Corey Cunningham was a character in Halloween 2018?
Should have been.
Bingo. It's not an episode of Halloween Lives unless we mention the most divisive character in the franchise thus far.
We should just change this to Corey Cunningham Lives.
Dude, I'm waiting for that comment to show up. Corey Cunningham was a very late addition to the David Gordon Green trilogy, leaving fans shocked and confused by the sudden misdirection of the narrative when 3 films into the trilogy, our main villain is replaced. These disappointed fans are typically not upset with the idea of a copycat killer as much as they're upset with the lack of cinematic conclusion that the marketing of Halloween Ends suggested. What if we got Corey's introduction in Halloween 2018, where we see only the budding romance between Allison and himself? What if Halloween Kills focused on this dark path Corey goes down as a subplot rather than the mob mentality one we got in Halloween Kills? As we end film 2, sorry, I can't read my own goddamn writing.
You can't read.
As we end the film 2 parts deep in a 3-piece story, we think our favorite slasher is dead and Corey has replaced him. Fans are livid until the final moment where the true shape reveals himself, burned and scarred from the fires at Laurie Strode's trap, putting an end to the copycat killer and setting the trilogy up for the epic final showdown that was promised between Laurie and Michael. Ideal trilogy right there, dude.
I like it. So you're basically rewriting the storyline. Corey gets involved much earlier, and really Kills is not focused on, as you mentioned, the mob mentality, but it's focused on really a lot of what we got in Halloween Ends about Corey kind of like going down this dark path until he finally starts to act on it. And then you get Michael coming back in Ends. Would you save you? Are you saying you would save it till the very end of the film that Michael comes back? I
think I would. I think maybe have Kills. You start off the film and you think it's Michael still killing, and then or however you want to do it, where Corey is essentially the main villain in Kills. Maybe you do know Michael's still out there. But essentially what you're doing is you're taking Ends and Kills and flipping a lot of those movies. Because then at the end of Kills, you have Corey's dead. Oh shit, Michael's really still out there. And so maybe it would be better if the audience didn't know Michael did survive. And then you've got Ends where, hell yeah, dude, give me the biggest, bloodiest rampage, but make it a beeline for Laurie Strode. And I almost wrote in this too that just give me Laurie as the sister at this point, because ultimately that Halloween ends with Laurie and Michael going head to head. Now after, Allison has gone through this huge character development of, she meets somebody that she loves. He ends up being the exact thing that her grandmother dealt with 40 odd years ago. I think it would have been a really cool way to still get everything we loved about Corey Cunningham's character, but stretch it out into 2 films and put it at the start of the trilogy rather than at the very, very end. I think people would have been pissed initially at Halloween Kills. Maybe if they watched 75% of the movie, they'd be really pissed, but that last 25 where you realize our true shape is still out there. And now it's like, it's like Return. Well, I'm not going to, I was going to say it's like Empire Strikes Back, but that doesn't mean shit to you.
Doesn't mean anything.
It sets you up for this huge final conclusive film. That's my what if.
I like that idea. And I think here is like, we are critical of all the films to a certain capacity, right? Including Halloween Ends. Like there are things about Halloween Ends that I don't like. We've mentioned this before 1,000 times over. Not going to get back into it. But we did not get, for those people who didn't like Ends, it left that entire trilogy on a really sour note. Like there was a bad taste that was left in a lot of people's mouths because of the fact that they didn't like Halloween Ends. So if you were to maybe reverse some of that stuff, have more character development, maybe see more of this sort of downward spiral of Corey throughout, 1 or maybe 2 of the films, and then, you get King Daddy Michael Myers coming back and taking on that true slasher, hey bitch, I'm the real OG Michael Myers, right? Like that's right. I'm this guy. Maybe that wouldn't have left a sour taste in so many people's mouths. Maybe it would have, maybe people still would. But here's the thing, like I don't, the thing that I don't, if I was going to be really critical of the Halloween Ends movie, like I'm talking really critical, like I'm thinking about it way too deep because I really do like this film and I don't want to think about it too deep because I don't want to dislike it. But if I was to really start thinking about it deep, the one thing that I can say that I don't necessarily like is the tag team thing that's sort of going on with Michael and Corey. I don't like that. Like I would have rather, to your point, like let's have Corey be a true copycat killer. He's obsessed with Michael Myers. He's just like, whatever it is. Maybe they don't have this weird interaction in the sewer. Maybe they do. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But Corey's like obsessed with this, and he's like, I want to be known as the Haddonfield Boogeyman, or what, whatever. Like he wants to take that notoriety on himself because he thinks Michael's dead or whatever it might be. I would be probably more in favor of that, where he's like a true copycat. Like he's not working with Michael. He is a true copycat killer. I would like that better. But
yeah, and I think I'm in the same boat. What I tried to do was create a different version of the last 2 films that not only would we like better, but fans who didn't like Halloween Ends would probably like better as well. I think it's a good middle ground. But I totally agree. Yeah, like don't give me the eye scene between Corey and Michael because I hate what that implies, and the book really goes into that. But give me, the babysitting thing happens to him at the start of Kills, and that darkness is just in him. It's not something that is transferred to him. It's just and I think it still fulfills the idea of that, like the kind of subplot of Halloween Kills is that like Michael Myers has infected the town to be monsters. Right. it ends up being personified in Corey in the third movie. But like, we can skip the stupid scene with the evil dies tonight in the hospital, letting the guy fall down or jump to his death. Skip that for a more compelling story with Corey doing what he does and ends, but just do it a movie earlier.
I love it. It would actually be really interesting, like if you had the time to really almost write it out, because not maybe scene by scene, but like a real, almost like a 2 or 3 page synopsis for each movie and how it could have been different. Like that could be really cool. Maybe something we have to do sometime.
Maybe it's already a little bit in the works.
Ooh, I like the way you're thinking. I like the way you're thinking. You could revive the David Gordon. You could put paddles on the David Gordon Green heart.
Could put paddles on a heart, baby.
Kickstart my heart like Motley Crue.
Just row that heart away gently down the stream.
All right, shut up. Let's go on to number 3 of mine. All right. Okay, so last but not least, gonna kind of go back to something very similar to what I had for my my first what if you will. And here's the thing, you and I talked about this. We could do a lot of these. Like we could do a lot of the, like there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could talk about. And we'd love to hear from you guys. Comment down below, send us messages, whatever. Let us know, like, what are your what ifs of the franchise? And maybe we could talk about that, because some people might spark some ideas, right?
I was gonna say, maybe if we see one that like we're like, oh my God, we gotta talk about this on the show.
Right.
Maybe for what if part 2 or Butterfly Effect part 2. Who knows?
Exactly. All right. My last and our final what if is, what if Jamie Lee Curtis wasn't cast for Halloween and Anne Lockhart, who was originally Carpenter's first choice, had been cast instead? So I didn't do a huge write-up on this one, but I did make a few notes. So Jamie Lee Curtis was 19 years old when they filmed Halloween. And Lockhart would have been 23 years old at that time. Lockhart still would have been the youngest of the trio of girls at 23 years old, with Nancy Keys, Annie, being 29, and PJ Souls, Linda, being 28 when filming occurred, which I think is so weird. Like, that is bizarre. I mean, I guess nothing really that we haven't seen before, where like in Scream or Dawson's Creek or like any of those movies. I Know What You Did Last Summer, all those movies, the teenagers are played by people in their 20s. But it's crazy to me that, like Nancy Keys was 10 years older than Jamie Lee Curtis when that was filmed, and they're supposed to be playing classmates, right? So you have that. Lockhart has been in many films and TV shows, but is most well known for playing Lieutenant Sheba in the television series Battlestar Galactica, which I'm sure you've watched. She's also well known as a voiceover actor. That's kind of what she's been doing a lot of lately. And apparently Lockhart has no recollection of being approached for the movie, but John Carpenter says she was his first choice and that she couldn't make the audition due to scheduling conflicts. So I don't know if you've ever seen her before or if you Google searched her, but Anne Lockhart. And she has, much like Jamie Lee Curtis, this very wholesome girl next door look. And when I look at pictures of her, I'm kind of like, I could see it. Like I could see it. If you look up pictures of her from the 70s, I could definitely see her in that role. She has a very, very similar look. But it makes me wonder if, because, well, two things here, right? Number one, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that old Miss Lockhart wishes she would have played Laurie Strode in the Halloween films, because I'm sure she would be living in a much larger house, driving a much more fancy and more expensive vehicle. But if she had been this character of Laurie Strode, how would that have changed the franchise? Like, let's just say she did play Laurie Strode in 1978. She had a horrific experience on this film. She hated John Carpenter. She hated everybody involved. She hates horror films. She never wanted to do this. We would have never gotten Halloween 2 as we know it. Therefore, we would have never probably gotten part 4, part 5, part 6, part H2O,
right.
Like, You take Jamie Lee Curtis out of it and you tweak just one very minor thing, like this Anne Lockhart gets the job, but she decides, nope, I'm one and done. I'm not interested in coming back. That ship has sailed. Dude, the entire franchise is either wiped off the map or completely different. And maybe they go back to the original idea of this Halloween anthology series in part 2 versus part 3. And now we don't have people up in arms about this crazy film that we got with part 3 that doesn't follow the storyline that we got in part 1 and 2. But also, Michael Myers does not live to see another day once 78 is over. Like, so many things could have happened.
I mean, to start it off, like, this person definitely wishes, things could have gone different. Obviously, we got Jamie Lee Curtis winning an Oscar last year. Right. And we in this community know it, but I'll say it again for the people in the back. The only reason she is standing up there is because of John Carpenter's little low budget movie in 1978. Right. And it's not like they weren't on even playing fields back then, but boy, look what's happened to Jamie Lee Curtis because of this franchise. Obviously, she has done big, bright things that are not in the Halloween franchise. You mentioned it, the holiday classic Christmas with the Cranks. But obviously, no, she's been in plenty of other movies that are huge. But those opportunities came because of, like I said, this little budget movie in 1978. It is wild, to think of sort of the remorse one might feel in Anne Lockhart's shoes. By the way, when you said her name, I thought this was going to be another Austin is Young moment, because I was like, who the fuck is Anne Lockhart? I looked up. I think the only thing I've ever seen her in is 2005's Chicken Little. Oh no, she was in
I was gonna say she was a voice, so you probably didn't really see her.
Well, right, she was in The Little Mermaid, I guess, as well. I don't know, maybe she's Ariel, I don't know, but
she was a voice in The Little Mermaid. I didn't even look up that.
Yeah, she was oh god, who did she play? No, but she was not Ariel. Doesn't matter then. Don't care about her unless she was that big fat bitch. Pat Carroll was Ursula. Side note. But yeah, no, I obviously it's insane how much it could have changed. I'd like to think of this in a positive light, though. What if Anne Lockhart found her true calling in the horror franchise? What if 45, 46 years later, she's showing up to age 45, signing autographs, shaking some hands? I mean, ultimately very happy with what we got and everything, but it's so wild to think about all these different things, especially like if Dr. Loomis was Peter Cushing and Laurie Strode was Anne Lockhart. What is this movie? It's a parallel universe, but it was this close to happening.
Very close. Very, very, very close. And yeah, I mean, like we talked about, it's the butterfly effect. One little thing could change for better or worse so much of this franchise. So much of this franchise. It's wild to think about. And here we are 45 years later, and we're now talking about a TV series and more movies and things like that. There are things happening behind the scenes that we're not aware of, where step left, we go this direction. Step right, we go this direction. And we don't even know what that's going to be yet, right? I mean, we don't know what that's going to be. And we're probably going to be sitting here, at least you and I, 10, 20, 30 years from now, still talking about this franchise in some capacity, going, hey, do you remember when they came out with season 1 of that, that Halloween TV show? Man, wouldn't it have been wild if they hadn't have cast Kesha as the main character? You know what I mean? Like, we'll be talking about shit like that. And that's just cool because we don't even know what the hell is going on yet.
Dude, I was thinking about it too. Somebody moves the chair in 1978. You and I are not doing this podcast today.
What do you mean moves the chair?
I was just saying a very small thing at a butterfly. Somebody calls in sick in 1978 on the first day of shooting. You and I are not talking about this franchise every single freaking week. You know, and it is wild.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So what do you guys think? What are some what ifs that you can think of? Let us know in the comments. Again, we're probably going to do more of these episodes in the future because there's a ton of them that we could talk about. It's a lot like the hot takes thing. Like there's just like this endless supply, endless list of different ideas that we could run with. So let us know. What do you guys think? Send us a message on Instagram. You know, and as always, we should have mentioned this earlier, but like us on Instagram, give us a follow, subscribe on YouTube if you haven't done it already. We love making these videos for it. We're already in year two of this awesome podcast. The only podcast out there doing this stuff on a weekly basis, and we love it. And we love you guys, and we are so excited to keep going in 2024. So
isn't our anniversary next week?
That is next week. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying we started the show in 2023.
Sure.
2024. You know what I'm saying? We're in year 2. But yes, our anniversary, 1 year anniversary, our 52nd episode next week. We've got a special one planned for you. So stick around, tune in. You'll find out what that's going to be. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for everyone who has subscribed, who's listened, who sent us nice comments. We get legitimately probably 10 to 12 messages every week of people reaching out, telling us how much they love what we're doing and what we're doing for this community, really. And that is what drives us. That is what makes us feel good to know that people actually give a shit and that they are enjoying this, because that's all we want, is to bring just a little bit of excitement into this franchise during the lull when we don't have a film or a TV show or whatever it might be. So it makes us feel good when you guys do that. So for those of you who reach out, we really greatly appreciate it. But that's going to do it for episode number 51, the first one of 2024. Next week, 1 year anniversary, baby. Episode number 52. Will you be there? I hope so. We'll see. We'll see. We hope that that's one of our, we hope that it's one of our most viewed episodes. And we've got some really fun things planned out. So we will see you guys next week, episode number 52. I'm Blaine Duncan. That is my brother Austin, who doesn't know what paddles are from a defibrillator. And we will see you next week.
Is this how you row a boat?
Go to bed.